Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Torres. I'm the president of the Long Island Hispanic Bar Association. And when we were asked to join this wonderful event and to come up with a topic, we came up with a topic which I think is a contemporary one. That's one that's ongoing right now. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, but I've been living in Long Island for the last 28 years. And this topic is something that's close to me, and that's the issue concerning the racial profiling that's been going on Long Island, particularly in Suffolk County. And these fine gentlemen are going to address this issue today. They're experts in the field. And so on behalf of all the Latino bar associations, Puerto Rican Bar Association, the Dominican Bar Association, the Latino Lawyers Association of Queens County, and the Latino Judges Association. Did I get them all? And lastly, the Hispanic National Bar Association, New York region. Matt?
That's good. Thank you, Frank. Again, welcome. This is the Racial Profiling of the Latino Community CLE panel. We wanted to thank again Judge Irizarry for putting this all together, and all the bar associations, as Frank listed, had a hand in today. And I also want to thank our panelists, who you'll meet in a second. This panel will explore the current law and examine specific incidents of racial profiling in New York, with a particular focus on Long Island. The panel will also address the revenue-raising impetus as a factor in the discriminatory targeting of Latina motorists. The panel will also examine necessary policy reforms that might curtail these illegal actions and issues involved in representing immigrant clients. We have a great panel. I'm just going to briefly introduce them by name, and then they will tell you a little bit more about themselves. Again, my name is Matthew Fernandez-Koenigsberg. I'm with the Hispanic National Bar Association, Region 2, and all the other bar associations, the DBA, the Latino Lawyers of Queens County, Long Island Hispanic Bar, Puerto Rican Bar, and Latino Judges. Are very happy to have you here, and you can find more information about our organizations in the pamphlet. First, I'd like to introduce Kevin Satterfield. Kevin, could you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Kevin Satterfield, and I am the past president of the Amistad Long Island Black Bar Association. I'm also a former prosecutor in Suffolk County, a former criminal defense attorney, and for the last year, I've been an agency attorney for the New York City Department of Correction. I was hired to help reform Rikers Island after the Nunez versus New York City federal court consent decree.
Thank you. And Luis Pagan?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Luis Pagan. I am a founding member of the Long Island Hispanic Bar Association. I am presently on the board of directors for the Suffolk County Bar Association. I am a solo practitioner with an office all the way out in Riverhead, which is way out there. I'm also admitted to practice in the the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico.
And Jose Perez from Latino Justice.
Good afternoon, Jose Perez, Latino Justice, Deputy General Counsel and Legal Director. I am a 32-year public interest practicing litigator with experience on both sides as a prosecutor with both a county district attorney and the New York State Attorney Generals, and over a decade with the Legal Aid Society. For the past 10 years, I've been the legal director at Latino Justice CLE. One of our pending cases is a pending 1983 civil rights action against Suffolk County, which I was included in this, the CLE materials, which I will be utilizing as a case example to discuss our firsthand experience in prosecuting civil rights violations out in Suffolk County.
And finally, Mr. Chris Kassar.
Chris Kassar. I have an office in Huntington, Long Island. Started my practice here at the Legal Aid Society in Brooklyn. After several years there, I opened up my practice in Huntington. We have several civil rights cases pending against Suffolk County. The one case that I've been asked to talk about is that we're suing Suffolk County over the traffic court that they have created in Suffolk County, where the traffic prosecutors and the court are singling out minorities and convicting them and putting them in jail, to the point where the administrative judge has just recently taken away the authority of a traffic judge to put someone in jail and is required that person who is subject to possibility of jail has to go before a district court judge. So, very happy to be here, and I look forward to any questions.
Great. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with Mr. Satterfield. Mr. Satterfield, you're a former ADA in Suffolk County, criminal defense attorney. Now you're at the Department of Correction. Please provide us with an overview, a jumping off point for this panel, your experiences with dealing with racial profiling in Long Island.
I'll give my overview as I deem the issue of racial profiling to be. And I would say since 2010, I have been writing, documenting, and speaking out on how America is reverting back to her racial glory days, quote unquote, pre-Brown versus Board of Education, an America in which Jim Crow America is reimagined. And as a predicate for my brief discussion, let me say that in 2006, the FBI reported a rise in white nationalists joining law enforcement agencies across the country, a story that has been grossly underreported. And this brings us to racial profiling in the year 2017. Racial profiling is a dominant way in which America uses her police to make America great again, great as in recreating an ironclad white dominant country in which African Americans and Hispanics are locked out of American mainstream society through police use of racial profiling, which results in mass incarceration and mass deportation of African Americans and Hispanics. And specifically, what method does this police culture as a modern day slave catchers culture use to achieve this goal? I contend that it's the use of the vehicle and traffic law as a dominant use to racially profile, arrest African American and Hispanic male drivers for being in possession of marijuana and guns, those two contrabands. And if you study the literature, it's clear that African Americans and Hispanics are disproportionately pulled over, arrested for possession of marijuana when it comes to vehicle and traffic law infractions. But the literature is also clear that African Americans and Hispanics are in no way more predisposed to violate the vehicle and traffic laws or even American drug laws than whites. Now, it's my contention that America allows its police force and its police culture to make America great again by using crime control as a pretext for race control. So be it New York City, Denver, Colorado, Seattle, Washington, Baltimore, Maryland, pick a city. As a general rule, America has a white male police culture that intentionally targets African American and Hispanic as undesirables to be driven out of this country, in which whites as a collective, not necessarily as individuals, but as collective, believes that America belongs exclusively to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Satterfield. Picking up from there, Mr. Pagan is a criminal defense attorney in Suffolk County. And you've done a lot of work with undocumented immigrants in this area. Tell us how racial profiling has affected specifically undocumented immigrants in Long Island, and maybe speak a little bit about how this group is specifically prone to these type of abuses.
Well, I've prepared a statement that I'd like to follow. It'll answer that question as I proceed, but Assalamu alaikum. I'm sure that all, if not many of you who heard me, thought for an instant that I somehow am a member of the Muslim community. This inherent bias is a conditioned mental reflex. It is brought forth instantaneously, and our beliefs are affirmed or denied as we interact. If you're interested in learning about this fascinating subject, you can go on Google and look up Inherent Biases of Language and Society and How They Shape America by Teddy Wolfe, and also look up Cognitive Bias. My topic of discussion here today is racial profiling as it relates to the victims of this societal disease. Like inherent bias, racial profiling is a learned behavior, and sadly, police officers are not immune from this condition. The consequences of this condition are devastating, for it destroys the lives of many in the community, especially the lives of the Hispanics on Long Island, particularly Suffolk County. I do want to make it clear that although this condition afflicts everyone, some police officers act out from this condition and commit crimes against the weak and vulnerable. It's a form of bullying. Let us look at the evolution of this insidious malady. Unlike New York City, which has many ways of getting around the city, Long Island has but three: bus, taxi, or your car. If you can take the Long Island Railroad if you work near the stations where it stops. Otherwise, you'd have to use one of the three. Before 1995, anyone who was a resident of New York State could get a license as long as they can prove or come up with 6 points that you live in New York, birth certificate, school, bills, anything that can show that you're a resident of New York, you could get a license. However, in 1995, the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles passed a regulation that now requires a Social Security number in order for someone to obtain a license. That means that immigrants who lived in New York for many years and had licenses could no longer get a license. The consequences of this one regulation are too many and too significant to go into here. It's just we don't have enough time. But they raise many questions. Just imagine for yourselves what they are. As an aside, I have always believed that this motor vehicle regulation violates the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Residents of New York go out of state to get licenses from states that do not require Social Security numbers. They go to other states to register their cars, to get plates for their cars, to get insurance for their cars. Insurance that usually is bogus because they really can't get insurance out of state, but someone out of state tells them they can get them an insurance policy, and then we end up paying the burden because they have no insurance, and somebody gets hurt, we pay for it. So now we have a large number of Hispanics on Long Island who have no other choice but to drive without a license or with a license from out of state. Keep in mind that these immigrants are the ones who tend our wineries out on the island. They do the landscaping, they clean house, they work in the restaurants that are a major source of income for Long Island, particularly during the summer. In the beginning, when the Motor Vehicle Department implemented this new regulation, many continued to drive without being targeted because it was a new thing. A lot of police officers were not aware. In time, police officers would stop Hispanics and found out that in many cases they had no licenses. So as time progressed, now the police officers came to the conclusion that that's a Hispanic. Chances are they don't have a license. And they would start, that's where the racial profiling began, out on Long Island. When an officer sees a driver who fits the stereotypical description of a non-white driver, the officer more often than not will pull them over and ask for a license. The officer basically needs some type of reason to stop them. At least that's the way it used to be. And would end up giving them tickets for no license, no insurance, no registration, as many tickets as they possibly could give. And yes, in many cases, they would search the vehicles without probable cause. You should note that in 1996, the U.S. Supreme Court held in Wren versus U.S. United States, 517 U.S. 806, the temporary detention of a motorist upon probable cause to believe that he has violated the traffic laws do not violate the Fourth Amendment prohibition against unreasonable searches, even if a reasonable officer would not have stopped the motorist, absent some additional law enforcement objective. So now, the standard is probable cause to believe that a driver has violated traffic laws. Thus here, an officer in Suffolk County, or any other county in America for that matter, can stop a Hispanic driver because there is a probability that that driver is unlicensed. And that is exactly what's happening. An officer sees someone who he believes to be Hispanic and concludes that there's a probability that that Hispanic does not have a license. What I find surprising is that even though drivers may have out-of-state licenses, they still get tickets for unlicensed. Moreover, on occasions I've had clients who come to me for help because they are given a ticket for driving, just for driving without a license, without any underlying reason for the stop. Well, yes, there is. It's a Hispanic driver, so there is a reason. And yet, there is very little that we can do. Think about this. A client is given tickets even though the only thing they did wrong is drive without a license. But how would the police officer know? For all intent and purposes, the driver did nothing wrong. And in many cases, I can have the tickets dismissed, many of the tickets dismissed, except the no license. Some ADAs know what's going on, and they do try to do justice for my clients. So they have the driver plead to the no license, and they fine them usually $293. How can we take up the challenge and go to trial on those cases? How can we then file an appeal after a judge has confirmed that that person is guilty of driving without a license? We can't. The client is in no position to pay for that battle, so we do the best we can to protect them from the abuse that sometimes, and even that is not enough, as my colleague Jose Perez will discuss. We are reaching a critical period in our history. There are many minorities who are coming together to become the majority. A majority who is becoming impatient while waiting for justice. I believe that the problems we are presently confronting have solutions. We need to really do what we can. Even though we constantly talk about it, we do nothing about it. And one truly effective way to diminish racial profiling and its multifarious manifestations is to incorporate diversity in all levels of society. We talk about it all the time, but we still see that in general, most places of power have very few, if any, positions for minorities. In Suffolk County, there are very few blacks and Hispanic ADAs, very few black and Hispanic police officers. We have 3 Hispanic judges, one of which is a appellate division judge, and 3 black judges. So, how can there be any understanding of the plight of minorities and immigrants on Long Island, and Suffolk in particular? How can we reduce, if not eliminate, racial profiling when there are very few members of the class being profiled in positions to correct this societal disease? We must stand together, Asians, blacks and browns, Muslims and whites. It is the only way do we dare disturb the universe. If we don't, there will never be peace. I have provided you with materials that explore this topic much more in depth. I recommend that you read the Southern Poverty Law Center's Climate of Fear, great article, Latino Immigrants in Suffolk County, New York, and an article by Carol Ruiz, Coming Out of the Shadows, Confronting Abusive Policing Against Latinos and Latinas. Wa alaikum salam, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pagan. Now, Mr. Perez, you're a Deputy General Counsel at Latino Justice, who has brought a federal class action lawsuit against the Suffolk County Police Department almost 2 years to the day, I believe, almost. Yes, yeah. And you're, I'm not going to talk, I'm going to let you discuss it, but some of those allegations involve, it sounded in federal law, 1983, and it involves a systematic program to profile Latinos, target them for intimidation, and subject them to all means of abuse. Could you please tell us about the lawsuit and the work that you've been doing at Latino Justice?
Yeah, I did just, again, I thought we got a great foundation introduction by my two colleagues here. Luis referred to two reports that are part of the materials. Actually, there's a report about Suffolk County discriminatory policing by Carol Ruiz. She's a former legal intern at Latino Justice and really worked hands-on with us in interviewing when all this was going on. And that Southern Poverty Law Center report came out after the November 2008 hate crime murder of Marcelo Lucero, an Ecuadorian immigrant who was attacked, beaten, and stabbed to death by a group of Long Island teens called the Caucasian Crew. And again, that was, Latino Justice worked very closely with the Southern Poverty Law Center in introducing them to our community contacts out there. And I think that report really documents the history of really anti-immigrant, anti-Latino sentiments. I think Kevin started out talking about white supremacists. Well, the KKK is alive and well. In Long Island, there are groups called Sachem, again, white nationalist supremacists. Anybody who doesn't look like them, doesn't talk like them, is not welcome. And groups like that, it's not, I should not be surprising that folks in Suffolk County overwhelmingly voted for our current president. Hello. So anyway, to put this all in context, right? Suffolk County has created really a political and legal structure for the discriminatory enforcement that is really unconstitutionally revenue biased and promotes discrimination against racial and ethnic minorities. My colleague Chris here is going to really talk about how this revenue-based policing model, where it's really let's target the people and ticket them and summons them and lock them up if they don't pay, really I think spurs some of the thinking out there. And what we need to think back is think Ferguson, Missouri. The whole issue with Ferguson exploded really, I think, race consciousness in this country was really based upon revenue-based thing. Black folks were being targeted and ticketed and arrested and subjected to fines, and if they didn't pay, they'd get locked up, and perpetuating these cycles of poverty, arrest, incarceration, and imprisonment that stigmatizes communities of color. Let me talk a little bit demographics, Suffolk County. Suffolk County has a population of 1.5 million. It occupies the central and eastern parts of Long Island. Geographically, it's the second largest county in New York, and at about 250,000 or 16.5% of Suffolk County residents are Latinos. Some are longtime Puerto Rican residents out there. My friend Frank here, well, not originally from Long Island, but again, Puerto Ricans, like every other ethnic group or immigrant group that has come to this country, let's move out, let's buy a house, let's go to the suburbs. They've been out in Long Island a long time. More recently, we've seen the influx from Central and South America, particularly what the term unaccompanied minors, immigrant youth and immigrant parents fleeing gang violence and terrorism from the Central American Triangle countries of Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, coming to Long Island, looking for places to escape violence, looking for places for economic opportunity. These Latinos are vital contributors to the economic, social, and political life in Long Island. Unfortunately, Long Island, like many suburban areas of the United States, has a long history of discrimination against racial and ethnic minorities. The police in Suffolk County, through racial profiling, disparate treatment, and neglect, have discriminated against Latinos and contributed to the county's culture of racism and violence. For many years, Suffolk County Police have unlawfully stopped and targeted Latinos. You heard Luis describe, telltale sign. If you look brown, you're dressed a certain way, you have like clothes, you look like a day laborer, you're likely to be stopped. If you drive with out-of-state license plates, you must have out-of-state license plates because you're illegal or you can't get a New York State license. You're going to get stopped. But even just without the out-of-state license plates, if you're driving even trucks and you have those tools there, and you're a day laborer, you're a landscaper, you're doing construction work, you are likely, with New York State license plates, you're likely to get stopped, ticketed, and for the unfortunate group that I represent, also robbed by uniformed members of the Suffolk County Police. In 2013, 14.5% of hate crimes reported in New York took place in Suffolk County, despite Suffolk County only accounting for 7.5% of the state's population. The arrest rate for these crimes in Suffolk County was a dismal 15.7%. This is again a county where the prior county exec would say, we don't have a hate crime problem. This is like the death of Marcelo Luceto. That was a one-day story. The national media came in and blew it up into something that it wasn't. Well, the facts don't lie. There were no hate crime arrests because police can voluntarily decide whether to describe or label something, and there is documented as a result of the Department of Justice's investigation that Suffolk County would not describe any type of bias incident report, and this is even before our current administration, as a hate crime. So how does law enforcement do this? They manipulate statistics about whether they describe it as a hate crime or not, and then decide whether to investigate it or not. As a result of that, the history, and again, there's history of Latino day laborers being robbed, beaten. There's a long history. Suffolk County legislatures in the past, during public hearings, describing, if they come to my town or village, I'll get a machine gun and go out there. This is documented in the Southern Poverty Law Center report. Not in my backyard. We all know that NIMBY, right? We don't want them. We want them to take care of our lawns, clean our houses, serve us in restaurants, but we don't want them living in our communities. And so with the rhetoric like that, it was not surprising that an incident like the murder of the attack on Marcelo Luceto in November 2008 occurred. In terms of context, what happened after that is that Latino Justice filed a complaint to the Suffolk County Police. It became known that many people came out in the community, that there had been these hate crime attacks going on for years prior, and that the Suffolk County Police knew and did nothing. And in fact, I represented a personal client who cooperated with the Suffolk County District Attorney after the Luceto murder, who had been beaten, robbed by the same group that attacked Luceto and his friend, and in fact, not being fearful, notwithstanding his lack of formal immigration status, did call the police and file a complaint. The next time he heard from and this was a year prior to Mr. Luceto being attacked and killed. The next time he heard from the police was a month after the Luceto murder, when he spoke at a public rally out at the Patchogue Long Island Railroad Station. That again was the culture. The Suffolk County Police was more interested. The first question, if you call to report a crime, are you a citizen? What's your legal status? Show me your papers. Law enforcement has an obligation to represent everyone in this country. The Constitution applies whether or not you are a citizen or a legal permanent resident, or you may be undocumented. Our rights apply equally. That is what makes America great, not the current administration spouting off hateful rhetoric. And so that was the chilling effect. So then move forward, Department of Justice investigates, finds discriminatory policing practice. Suffolk County fails to properly train, fails to properly educate, fails to properly monitor its officers. They could have uncovered what was going on, but they chose not to. Why? Because the victims were brown folks from Mexico, or from Ecuador, or from Honduras, right? It didn't matter. They don't look like us, they don't talk like us, it doesn't matter. Well, is it then not surprising that, on the heels of this, of a consent decree being signed by the Department of Justice and the Suffolk County, that a major news announcement, a uniformed member of the Suffolk County Police in January 30th, 2014 was arrested in a sting operation by the District Attorney's Office for racially profiling, stopping, and robbing from a Latino motorist. Again, widespread publicity. Folks came out of the woodworks. They had been living in Long Island, as you heard, for 5-10 years, had been routinely subjected to these illegal stops for no basis other than their racial appearance, and not just ticketed, but often robbed. Uniformed members would say, gee, let me check your papers, I gotta run, give me your wallet. Why? Because Latino immigrants are often more likely to get paid in cash, or more likely to carry cash on them. They don't utilize our banking system as prevalent as those that that we're accustomed to doing. And what happened? They check the wallet, give them back the wallet. They go, "You're free to go. That's okay. I'm giving you a warning this time." They would then leave, check their wallet. "I'm missing $100. I'm missing $200. I have clients who, in fact, again, irrespective of their status, contacted the Suffolk County Police. There are those who would not contact because they were fearful of being questioned about their status. There were those that saying, "How can we call the police to investigate the police?" They're not going to believe that me, a Latino brown man, or a Latina brown woman, was stopped by this white-haired, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white officer and accuse him of this. These are folks fleeing like where there is corruption in their law enforcement agencies in their native country. But some folks were brave enough or didn't know any better or actually had relatives who were citizens. "No, this isn't the America way. You need to come forward and file a complaint." Again, these complaints were filed. The arrest of the individual's name was Scott Green. He was a sergeant of over 20 years standing in the Suffolk County Police. He had complaints were made. He was arrested in end of January 2014. Complaints were made at least 2-3 years earlier. As detailed in our complaint, which is again part of the CLE materials, you'll hear of one example where somebody again indignantly called 911, "I'm missing money from my wallet. I was stopped by an officer," and this is one of the non-green stops, which is critical. So the dispatcher got a commander. The commander said, "Stay where you are. We'll come out." Some unknown police officer in uniform came out and said, "Here's your money, amigo. It got lost. Please don't call the news. Don't call. You don't need to file a complaint." Again, so this is there. Internal Affairs, when the complaint was filed by one of our clients in July 2012, they did not contact or interview the victims until 6 months later in January 2013. What happened between January 2013 and January 2014 when Sergeant Green was arrested? Your guess is as good as mine. Was it like, Suffolk County couldn't believe that a uniformed member of the department was stopping and robbing Latinos? Is it, it took them a year to get their act together to mount a sting operation? Testimony during the Green criminal trial says that they had periodic meetings again, but there was no explanation during the trial testimony as to why they took so long to mount the sting operation. But the sting operation was videotaped, was audio taped, and there in black and white was Sergeant Green palming money in his sleeve from an envelope and actually it was a Puerto Rican detective who was posing as a Central American day laborer. Go figure. So that's our case. There's this, bringing these types of cases, litigation against municipalities. We have sued Suffolk County, we've sued the police department, we've named individual officers. Green is currently in jail. Thanks to many of our victims, our clients, victims who cooperated with the DA's investigation, went to view lineups, testified in the grand jury. There was a trial there were 2 indictments. On the first indictment, he was convicted, again, by a jury of his peers, meaning i.e. there were 12 white jurors in Suffolk County. He was acquitted of the hate crimes. The DA had charged Green with larceny as a hate crime, but he was convicted of some of the thefts and again for government misconduct. And he's currently serving an indeterminate term of 1 to 3 years upstate. He applied for early parole last year. Our clients, Latino Justice with our clients, wrote letters in opposition, and his early parole was denied, thankfully, and he's now will have to serve at least 2 years of his 3-year sentence and won't be out until some point January 2018. But again, litigation against municipalities for discriminatory policing is very difficult, it's challenging, there are many obstacles. We've heard, it is reality. Those of us here in New York City, we know. We've heard the term stop and frisk. Latino Justice was one of the civil rights groups that had brought a series of lawsuits. You might have heard the Floyd case. The lead counsel on that is the Center for Constitutional Rights. A Southern District New York federal judge found that the NYPD had engaged in a system of discriminatory stop and frisk. The police call it stop, question, and frisk. Those of us who live in the city know there is no question between the stop and frisk. You're stopped and you're frisked. Your hands up against the wall, the hood of the car, and you're frisked. And then you're questioned after the fact, after they claim they found contraband or something that you were doing wrong. So there is this history. How do you do this? As our complaint details gives you examples of again, you're challenging the county's failure to train properly, failure to monitor, to institute safeguards or protocols. Now these are tough cases. We have experts that we've retained. We're in discovery right now. The case is still 2 years on, going. Can't see. I'm too old. Time is up. Okay. So the last thing I wanted just to briefly touch upon is part of your materials is that when we filed our complaint, we identified our plaintiffs as John and Jane Doe 1 through 21. We moved at the time of filing for an order to proceed anonymously, to have our clients use the pseudonym John and Jane Doe. We've used Juan Valdez in other cases, but that gets a little confusing sometimes. Although he does make a great cup of coffee, right? And so in the materials, Judge Spat, one of the senior judges in the Eastern District, did grant this. There are a number of factors, and again, when you represent immigrants, our clients were terrified about cooperating. We represented them every step of the way when they cooperated with the DA's investigation, going to court, testifying, to sue these people. Like the police would send detectives out there, and we had to yell at them, why are you sending detectives from the police department to pick up or interrogate our clients? No, they're not talking to them. You have to come through us. So again, there was great fear that if we brought a civil rights court action in federal court against the county and the police, that they were going to be retaliated against. And we all know, particularly given the rhetoric that is going on today, it is not just rhetoric, it's happening. Folks, again, longtime residents are getting locked up and detained and deported. In there, Judge Spat analyzed the factors and found that our clients had a reasonable fear of being persecuted and retaliated, given that yet, the detectives from the police department had gone to their homes unannounced, had questioned them, notwithstanding that they were represented by counsel. And so that is one of the great challenges, I think, particularly when working with immigrant populations and working particularly with undocumented folks. So my time is way up. We'll answer questions after.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Cassar, you just heard Jose Perez talk about the lawsuit that Latino Justice brought, but you have your own lawsuit, not against the police department, but against the Suffolk County Traffic and Parking Violations Agencies and all of the administrative people working there.
I hear you, Matthew.
Okay.
I hear you.
So you can't hear me.
Press the button.
All right, Mr. Cassar has his own lawsuit against the Suffolk County Traffic Agency and the JHOs and the administrators there. Please tell us about your experiences and your lawsuit, please, sir.
Okay, you get a ticket here in the city, you go to traffic court. It's usually, I assume, part of the DMV state system. Suffolk County several years ago was part of that system. So you'd go to traffic court, you'd see a judge, JHO, adjudicate your ticket, and you were done. Several years ago, Suffolk County opted out of that system and created its own traffic court. It's a division of the district court. And it was created solely to generate funds for the county. As a result, the minorities have been ticketed and brought to this court where they are being mistreated. We represented an individual by the name of Jose Medrano. Jose Medrano, in April of 2015, had a ticket for driving without a license and using the cell phone. He had an attorney at the time, but he didn't show up for his court conference, his trial date, neither him or his attorney. The traffic court decided to proceed in absentia. The cop was there, they took testimony, they conducted a trial, and the judge found him guilty, of course, and sentenced him in absentia to 15 days in jail. They issued a bench warrant for Mr. Medrano. They brought him in the next day. They knew where he lived. They brought him in the next day, and then they decided to call his attorney. Oh, by the way, your client is here, and we're gonna send him to jail for 15 days. They knew who the attorney was the day before. They had his phone number, but they decided not to make that call. The judge did sentence, pursuant to the judge the day before, sentenced him, executed sentence for 15 days, and that's when my office got the call. We then proceeded with a writ of habeas corpus, went before a Supreme Court judge, and he was released. The judge found that the traffic judge and traffic court violated his constitutional rights, and he was released. The judge directed us to go back, the Supreme Court judge did direct us to go back to the traffic court on a date certain, which we did. When we went there, the traffic judge had no idea why we were there or what he was gonna do. So he said, I'm just gonna re-execute sentence. I said, Judge, you can't do that. Supreme Court judges found that the trial was unconstitutional. And he said, well, that's what I'm gonna do. Mr. Medrano decided to walk out of the court. I then brought, the next day, they issued a bench warrant for him. The next day, I brought an Article 78 and got a judge to stay that bench warrant, pending appeal and pending the Article 78. Once I started to examine what happened to Mr. Medrano, I saw that this was happening to other minorities. I really didn't go to traffic court that much. I had associates going there, but now I decided to go and see what was going on. I would go to that court and I would see minorities being told that they didn't need attorneys by the traffic prosecutors. I was being told by other attorneys how they felt their minority clients were going to jail more often than white, Caucasian individuals. So we foiled Suffolk County Sheriff's Department to find out how many minorities, or how many people were being sentenced to jail time by the traffic court. And we found that about 90% of the individuals that were being sent to jail were minorities. So then we brought on a civil rights action against the county for several grounds, but one of them for the mistreatment of, the mistreatment of minorities in that particular court. That case is still pending. The county's hired outside counsel. They're trying to have the case dismissed, but we feel very strong that the judge is going to deny that application. Back to Mr. Medrano, what the county did, what was kind of interesting, they actually appealed the decision to the Appellate Division Second Department, Judge Cohen's decision to release Medrano. They tried to argue that certain constitutional rights that apply to criminal defendants do not apply to traffic motorists. The Appellate Division Second Department did not agree with them at all on that particular issue. Said if you're going to take it's a liberty issue. If you're going to take away somebody's rights, then you need to tell them before you're going to conduct a trial in absentia that could happen. You need to also tell them that you can sentence them in absentia, which is the state of the law on the New York v. Parker. They have to be advised prior to conducting a trial in absentia, which wasn't done here. But we were really surprised that the Suffolk County attorneys decided to appeal that because it was clear on its face that what they did was unconstitutional. We have been waiting for the decision to come down from the Eastern District of New York judge. It's Judge Azraq has the matter. She did refer it to Magistrate Lindsay. We're waiting for her decision, her report on whether they're going to deny or dismiss our action. We feel very strong that it will not be dismissed. It's just an attack by the county to delay. Meanwhile, the administrative judge of Suffolk County got involved and issued an order because they were putting minorities in jail in that traffic court without counsel. So they would conduct hearings and sentence someone to jail without an attorney. The administrative judge ordered that anyone that traffic prosecutor intended to put in jail, they had to notify the traffic judge, and the judge had to assign a counsel to that individual. Subsequent to that, the administrative judge issued an order taking the power out of the traffic judge to incarcerate somebody in that jail. So now, if the traffic prosecutor intends to put somebody in jail, they must notify the traffic judge, and the case is now going to be transferred to the district court in Suffolk County, and that'll go before a district court judge. And in the district court, very rarely does anyone go to jail for driving without a license. Very rarely. You would have to have like 25 driving without a license in order to go to jail. But over in the traffic court, they'll put you in jail, especially if you're a minority, on the first time. The other issue that we're dealing with at that traffic court is that they have a policy of doubling and tripling fines. If you don't pay your fine within 30 days, they double it. So typically a fine in that traffic court is around $500. You don't pay it within 30 days, now it's 1,000. You don't pay within 60 days, it's 1,500. Minorities don't understand that. First of all, these warnings are in English. They don't understand if they don't pay this within 30 days. Now it's $500. It's usually a week's pay for some of these individuals. I mean, the fines in that court are extremely, extremely high. And to have it doubled and tripled, that could be like a month's pay almost. One of the problems we're having is that we've been told, and I haven't been able to prove this yet, but the funds generated by this traffic court is earmarked for the police contract, funds the Suffolk County Police contract. So just think about what kind of incentive a Suffolk County police officer has to give out tickets. And tickets to the minorities is an easy mark. So we do have a very...
Excuse me, Mr. Rizzo.
Yes.
And can you please tell the audience what is the average salary of a Suffolk County police officer after 5 years, approximately?
They're making about $150,000 a year, anywhere.
Suffolk County, Long Island police officers are among the highest paid law enforcement in the country.
I don't pay your taxes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative job. But getting back to this incentive for officers to write tickets, and minorities are an easy target. A lot of times they won't defend themselves, or they won't show up to court, and then they'll get a suspended license because they didn't show up to court, and now they pulled over, and now they have driving with a suspended license, which now it's a misdemeanor, so that has to go to the district court. In some cases, and Louis will tell you this, we feel it's better off our clients getting a misdemeanor, where it would have to go to the district court, than with a violation, traffic movement violation, to end up in the traffic court. Because we will get better deals, we'll get non-jail deals in the district court. What's going on there is just, and I hear every day from attorneys, and Louis will tell you, every day I hear from attorneys, what's going on with the lawsuit, when is something gonna be done? It's just a real problem. Getting back to the demographics, Suffolk County, we don't have integration in Suffolk County. I like to say we have pockets of minorities. We have towns that are minorities, but we don't have that integration at all. And that goes back to what Louis was saying, I think earlier, is that you have this certain mindset, and you have the district attorney's office that every minority, unfortunately, when the DA comes out, has a press release, every minority is a gang member, whether it's an African American or if it's a Latino, and they constantly drill this notion into the public. I see when I try cases. I try a lot of cases, I'm picking juries. If I have a minority, I have to deal with the issue of whether the person is a gang member or not. It's a very big problem as well. I'll answer any questions if anybody has any.
Well, we'll just do a really quick Q&A if anyone has a question right here.
Can you guys speak to the issues and the hurdles that you face in Suffolk County because of the well-known corruption that's out there in the local governments, and with all the complications of the towns and villages and ports versus the counties?
It is a major hurdle. Judges have told me that they don't want to take my cases because it's too controversial. I had filed a motion in the Supreme Court in Suffolk County asking that my cases in traffic court be removed from the traffic court to the district court. 8 judges recused themselves. They haven't heard it. The last judge that has it right now has been sitting on it for about a year. So it's a problem. It's a major problem. And part of the problem too is we have many attorneys that are afraid to take on these issues. Which, they come to me and I'll come to Louis and they'll make complaints. The first thing we'll say, well, do something. Bring a lawsuit. No, I don't want you. I don't want to take that on for whatever reason.
There is a lot of political interconnection in Suffolk County between either the county exec offices, the traffic court, who the prosecutors and the administrative judges there. But even within an example, within the Suffolk County Police, the county's official position in our case is Sergeant Green, he's one bad cop. Yeah, we arrested him, we prosecuted him, he's in jail, we did our job. The criminal justice system worked, case closed. Well, what about all my other clients who were stopped and brought by other cops? That they still refuse to acknowledge that there was a pattern or a practice of going on which supervisors or administration or the police commissioner knew, should have known, and failed to take any action. And so that's the monumental challenge. And then you talk about corruption. The former Suffolk County Police chief himself was accused of misconduct, which they failed to act when it took the federal government, Department of Justice, and the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute him and put him in jail. So you have this culture, like, again, the blue wall, cops have a very difficult job. Acknowledge, and for the most part, they do a great job of protecting us. But sometimes when there is wrongdoing or misconduct, they have to come forward, and they should not be protecting a fellow officer just because they wear the same uniform. If they engage in criminality, it destroys their reputation, it destroys the department, it destroys our culture and our society.
One more question, and then we'll wrap up right there.
I'm just wondering, has anybody ever done like a meta study of corruption in various police precincts throughout the country and compare like how corrupt, what's the degree of corruption that exists among? Because I'm thinking to myself that this really, I mean, what you're talking about in a police department, Suffolk County has to do with traffic tickets and discrimination. It's not like the drug trade or something like that, but it shows like that there's such a collusion of the very highest levels that and the threats that people feel to not take cases on just makes it seem like there is much more at stake here than just.
Well, let me say that during the Obama administration, had many consent decrees with various police departments across the country. To your question, it goes to my thesis. The problem we're talking about on this panel is nationwide, but it's not just nationwide. Let me give you a quote. The quote is this: "We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horror of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horror of police brutality." That was Dr. King at the March on Washington speech in 1963, August 28th. So this is a historical problem that goes to my thesis. The problem is America uses its law enforcement agencies as the dominant means of race control, using the criminal laws and traffic laws to impose race control on Black and Hispanic population. And until we accept that reality, that historical reality, we'll never change anything. The last thing I would say is this: we always make the argument is always made, we need better training. It's better training, or it's just an individual police officer. To me, that is just, it's a lie. Forget the euphemism, it's a lie. The problem is, in America, with law enforcement agencies, we don't test for racial and gender bias. Because if you want to solve the problem, you would test for racial and gender animus. And you would weed out a whole lot of, I continue to weed out 80% of the police department across the country. And so, unless you weed out those who manifest racial and gender bias, you will always have this problem. Because if you just argue that it's a question of tactics and training, then you are not acknowledging the fact that you have a mindset and a mental conditioning of those who actually want to be police officers. And why do they want to be police officers? And that's the central issue as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.